Hello and welcome into this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. It is Sunday evening, 11:25 p.m. Eastern Time when we are recording this podcast, and Brooks Koepka is your winner of the 105th PGA Championship. Just a clinical display. Final round 67 gave him a two-shot victory over Scottie Scheffler and Victor Hovland. Fifth major championship title for Brooks Koepka, now the 20th player all-time to win at least 5 major championships, the 7th player all-time to win that number by the age of 34. Rex, you are not in the media center at Oak Hill. You have not joined me in slaving away over a keyboard, pounding out a 3,000-word lead story.
3,000 words? That's what you wrote?
On Brooks Koepka. There's so much to unpack. What it means for him historically, what it means for the Tour LIV culture war, what it means for the U.S. Ryder Cup team. Where does your mind go initially with this Brooks Koepka victory?
You know what's weird is I was flying home. We kind of alluded to this a couple times in the podcast. I flew home today from Rochester to Orlando because my youngest son graduates from high school early tomorrow morning, so I wouldn't have been able to make it. It wasn't a good travel day. I don't want to talk about it.
It almost seems like you didn't make it today. Like you almost didn't make the graduation.
It was touch and go there for a while. 12 hours home from Rochester to Orlando is not the way you should do it. But I did write, actually. I wrote a Michael Block column because I thought that was a very, very cool story. And I actually wrote a story about, I don't even know if you saw this and everything else you were kind of unpacking, but my mind immediately goes to how it impacts the Ryder Cup, which is a weird thing to do because all the historical points you just kind of
we're 4 months away from the Ryder Cup, and your mind is initially going there. That's interesting
because this seems like it locked it up. I think by most accounts that I saw, this is going to move him to second on the list, which is, I think that's not technically, probably not mathematically, but it's going to lock them up. And so suddenly all of those things that we sort of whispered about, well, all right, maybe not, maybe, but all those things, at the very least, it's going to put him inside the top 10. I feel comfortable saying. So then if he's not locked as in the top 6, I think that's even more difficult for Zach Johnson. But beyond
how do you leave off of reigning major champion on the team?
I don't think you can. No. I don't think you can. But to put it in context,
50-pole leader at the Masters.
And you know what was fun is I actually spent the last 2 days kind of doing a lot of reporting about Brooks, and I'm sure you could talk to Claude, and Claude Harmon, his swing coach, had a lot of interesting things to say. But I talked with his dad, Bob Koepka, last night, and we sort of covered a lot of ground. One of the things, and I think I touched on this last night, was I don't think people understood how injured he was. Like the idea for my story was how broken was Brooks, because in retrospect, when you talk to the people who are around him, they'll tell you that it was almost Tiger-like. It was almost career-ending. It was almost to the point that he's never going to play golf again. And to get from that point to where he is right now, I think that's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. The one quote that
did that make it into your story
from his press conference was this quote, and I'm going to have to clean this up because it's a family podcast. Part of my language, Brooks Koepka said Sunday night, but it's all the effing poop I had to go through when asked why, like, the emotion had bubbled up.
Did he say poop
while he was walking? He did not. While he was walking from the 18th green to the scoring, all the effing poop I had to go through. No one knows all the pain. So yeah, it felt good. It felt really good. The genesis for my story, kind of building off yours, I think different, was this is obviously a singular achievement for Brooks Koepka, right? Like, he's the one who is posing for pictures with the Wanamaker Trophy. He's the one who gets all the glory. I focused on all of the team members around Brooks and all of their personal anecdotes and stories and helping rebuild him back into a major champion. Like, he had not won in 4 years. He was broken 2 years ago. Last summer, like literally less than a year ago, Claude Harmon, his swing coach, said that it was the worst that he'd ever seen Brooks Koepka play. We all saw the Netflix documentary. We all saw how he was portrayed in kind of a new, open, vulnerable, accessible, kind of contemplating his career mortality. And so listening to Claude Harmon talk about the LIV decision and what went into it. Listening to Pete Cowan, who has kind of been this unforgiving truth teller over the years as it comes with Brooks, telling him not necessarily what he wants to hear, but what he needs to hear. Hearing from Ricky Elliott, who's been there with Brooks for the highs and lows, going out to LA with him 2 years ago and spending 2.5 weeks with him in LA as he began the surgery and then the rehabilitation process. Talking to Andrew Cummings, Brooks Koepka's trainer, who got the call last November that this ailing star needed a lot of help, and really did the grunt work, right, of actually putting this player back together. Brooks Koepka has said endlessly that I knew that I could win again if I could just get healthy. And so it starts with the trainer, and then it builds on to all the other portions. So that's kind of the tack that I took on Sunday night, and why that story ended up being 3,000 words.
Wow. I can't wait to read it. I actually do want to read it. And usually I would be very reluctant to dive into 3,000 of your words on a Sunday night because you have a tendency to go. But that one I am curious about because I've talked to the members of the team. And I think there's so many elements to this. You're right. I mean, the Ryder Cup element, what this means about pro golf at the highest level. Like, what is it? Like, I don't know how many people texted me about, so what does this mean about LIV Golf right now? And I don't know that it changes.
Like Brooks, but like Brooks and his team didn't go into that at all on Sunday.
And I wouldn't imagine he would.
It wasn't like the time nor the place for that. And I'm sure that's going to come, right? That's going to come in the days. It's probably going to come in the weeks. It's going to be a predominant storyline, I'm sure, when next time we see Brooks Koepka, at least in person, at the U.S. Open. But right now, it just felt like this was time for reflection, right? Like looking at his journey. I think we've touched on it, but I am curious, what does this mean, right? Like we could talk about it. Brooks might not be wanting to, but what do you think it means for the landscape?
Well, it's funny. I sent a manager texting me that exact question, and I sent him like a War and Peace novel text back, and his response to me was, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Well, that was disappointing." Because my take is
he just gives you the thumbs up
emoji. You're like, "All right, that was a waste of time. I shouldn't have even have gone that far." I went back to Augusta, and I felt like that normalized it to a certain degree because you had both sides together. And there wasn't this conflict, whether the conflict was manufactured by the media or not. And that's a whole nother conversation. It wasn't there. I mean, we saw, everybody hugging Dustin Johnson. We saw all of the players moving around the range. Yes, it was a little uncomfortable for Phil Mickelson, and Patrick Reed probably didn't get a lot of hugs, but the rest of them were just glad to be back. I mean, I saw Harold Varner the other day, just smiling and happy as can be. And people were happy to see him. And I think the Brendan Steele sort of Keegan Bradley thing that I wrote about a couple of days ago Keegan missed his friend and he hadn't been around. So I think that normalized it to a certain degree. And my guess is, and we're going to have to wait to see how this plays out, this just does that even more. I don't think that the two sides are ever going to come together anytime soon. But what you're going to end up with is
you don't think Brooks can play peacemaker? I mean, he's not bashed the tour. I mean, Jay Monahan was in his wedding. He's not bashed any of the players who've stayed on the tour. He's just kind of done his own thing. Wouldn't he be the perfect person to kind of mend some bridges if they are actually going to go that route?
To that point, actually, at the Champions Dinner earlier this week at Oak Hill, I mean, I was told that Brooks and Jay had a long conversation. That you're right. Like, he could play peacemaker. I don't even know if that's an option right now, I guess is the way I put it out there. And the reason I say that is I feel like at the highest level, and I'm talking about Jay Monahan and Greg Norman on the two sides, I don't see either one of those leaders having any interest in trying to meet in the middle. I think both of them are so entrenched at this point that something else is going to have to happen. And I have no idea what that would be to burn both sides closer to the middle. But what I did think, and kind of wrote an item, and Zach Johnson had an interesting interview today where there was a lot of back and forth about, are you going to welcome Brooks onto this team? And are you going to go to LIV events and start scouting players? And
incredibly uncomfortable interview.
It seemed like it. I just read it again. I was kind of reading it in the Sky Lounge in the Atlanta airport. But it seems to me that if anything else, the Ryder Cup, and this is why I went straight to the Ryder Cup could play that peacemaker role where suddenly, I mean, whether you like it or not, Brooks is going to be on that team. And I can imagine a scenario where at least one other player can play his way on there, whether that's DJ or I don't know who else
Bryson
could possibly.
I mean, Bryson could do it. He's finished
absolutely.
T4. He's finished T4 in a major.
Sure. And I can imagine a scenario where you have at least two players on that team. And then all of a sudden now it's become normalized. It's become it isn't two sides. You don't have two distinct universes. And I think that could go a long way to making this a little bit normal.
I do agree with you on that front. I do think Brooks's victory here at Oak Hill does shatter some of those preconceived notions. It does shatter some of those narratives that have been pushed, including by some on our air over the past year. One of the main criticisms of these players who took the bag was that, look, these guys are getting guaranteed money that they're not going to care anymore. And Claude Harmon III, talking to him as much as I did over the past 2 days, he's made a bunch of valid points. Chief among them, when Lamar Jackson just signed his mega deal with the Ravens, got $185 million guaranteed. No one is saying that this guy's not going to try and win a Super Bowl now because he just got the bag and just got paid, right? Like, this does not happen in any other sport. Justin Verlander goes to the Mets. LeBron signs a new mega deal. John Morant, whatever the case may be, like, those guys all of a sudden aren't just satiated. They're not just satisfied. They're not just going to phone it in because they got paid. And so why is there this double standard in golf? Why is Brooks any different than any of those players? That was the first one that he got. Secondly, he said if Brooks didn't care about his legacy anymore, if he was just content with his playing career, then why did he hire Claude Harmon III back last summer? If you recall, it was a nasty split 2 or 3 years ago, fueled in large part because of one of Claude Harmon's other students, Dustin Johnson, became a world beater in 2020, and there's a little bit of rivalry and jealousy on that front. But it was nasty, it was personal, it was hurtful. They took 2 years apart. If Brooks Koepka did not care about being a great player anymore, then why did he swallow his pride in July 2022, sidled up to Harmon and said, "Hey, I need your help. I still think I can win major championships. I still believe that I have a lot of glory left in me. Please help me rediscover it." Like, that's not what we've come to expect from these players. We thought that they're just going to go waste away and they're going to become irrelevant. And they're not going to factor in major championships anymore. They're just going to be content with what their playing record was. I think the Masters showed that that's not true. 3 of the top 6 in the leaderboard there. And now Brooks Koepka doing it here, as well as Bryson DeChambeau. Cam Smith had a good Sunday. Like, these are still great golfers. It's just a matter of, like, he equated it to NASCAR and Formula One. There's 2 different tours, but you're still a car driver. Like, you still drive a car. Some drive for NASCAR, some drive for Formula One. And then when you get like, no one's like, "Oh, you drive for NASCAR, you're not a real racer." No one goes to Max Verstappen, "Hey, you drive for Formula One, you're not a real race car driver." That's not what the case may be. It's just in golf, we have 4 times a year that we can get these players together. They're golfers. They're golfers. It doesn't matter what tour they're necessarily on.
I feel like Claude missed the boat. He should have copyrighted, took the bag, turned that into T-shirts and hats, because I've heard that line a lot myself. It's a good line. They took the bag. And this is a little unfair, and I'll take the heat on it because I started with the Ryder Cup and the LIV Golf stuff, because it does ignore a brilliant performance. I mean, watching him today, he did what I thought Scottie Scheffler was going to do, honestly, after essentially 2 3/4 rounds. I thought he was just going to be able to go out there and play prevent defense, and that's essentially what he did. I mean, I will give actually. I'm going to go on record really quick on this.
I don't think that was prevent defense Sunday at Oak Hill. What Brooks Koepka did, like, he made 6 birdies. He was very much on the offensive. Victor Hovland, we haven't gotten into it. Like, that was a gamely performance by a guy who we talked about on this podcast, had a lot to prove, right? St. Andrews.
Well, and I will say this.
Augusta National.
I asked, and I think you had asked Brooks, what did you learn from Augusta that you can carry over? And he was very reluctant on Saturday night to tell you that. I called Bob Koepka and tried to get the same answer out of him. Like, what did he learn? Do you think he's going to turn over? And Bob actually said he felt like that he was 100% going to be aggressive, that whatever it is he decided to do on Sunday at Augusta didn't work. And all right, you know what? I'm just going to go out and be aggressive. And if it's not good enough, then fine. It's not
Pete
good
Cowan told me, quote, "I almost tried not to lose it." That was
You
Brooks.
mean at
That
Augusta?
was that was Brooks Koepka's mentality, and he said he was never going to do that again. That in that
I can see
position,
that.
he has to know that guys are going to come chase him, guys are going to come after him, and he needs to be ready for the fight. He needs to be ready for the fight. He needs to get after it.
And just to
That was
go
like
on
the
the
big
record,
mystery.
well, and just to go on the record, and this epiphany came to me as I'm watching the final round in the Delta Lounge in Atlanta Airport, and I felt like even texting you. I knew you were busy, so I didn't bug you. But
Or didn't have
and
service.
please, yes, meet me, everybody, the world, meet me on camera one right here. I was wrong about Victor Hovland. I think I sat here on this podcast last night and said, nope, not going to get it done. Like I just don't have any faith in his short game. I was wrong. He's going to win a major, and it might be the next major. It might be the Open Championship.
Is so good. Victor Hovland.
That dude did everything he could
so
possibly do. Yeah, I mean, there is no way. I think he missed the green on 2, if I'm remembering this correctly, and it was not an easy up and down. I mean, it was actually a tight lie down at the bottom of the hill, and he had to hit kind of a manufactured shot, had to hit a spinner. And I'm sitting in the lounge thinking to myself, this is glorious. Like I'm the grief eater. I'm gonna sit and watch him skull this across the green, and it was just perfectly hit. A lot of spin, right on the right spot, spun it to about 2 feet and made the putt. You know what? That shows me I have changed. I've changed my mind. I'm on Team Victor right now. He's going to win a major.
He is going to win a major. The ball striking is so good. It was not his best ball striking performance on Sunday,
good,
and yet
though.
it was
good.
I mean, it was his short game play. It was putter that actually bailed him out and was the reason why he was fighting all the way into the end with Brooks Koepka. I was positioned about 20 yards ahead of Victor Hovland on that 16th hole when he found the fairway bunker. Probably got a little bit too greedy with a 9-iron. Ended up catching the lip and had to get the relief and ended up making double bogey. It was striking to me how Brooks Koepka's demeanor did not change throughout that entire ordeal. He sat there with his hand on his hip, foot crossed in front of the other, stoic, calm, confident, unflinching. And then when it was his turn to play, he did so in about 15 seconds. Got the club, got the yardage, took a swing, stepped in, took one look at the target, and whoosh, and knocked that thing to about 3 feet. Ball game. And that was it. I mean, the tournament was over. The tournament was over in a matter of 3 minutes. But Victor Hovland, to put a fine point on it, an exceptional performance. He kind of bowed out early, right at St. Andrews, shot 74 in the final group with Rory McIlroy, tied for the 54-hole lead. Penultimate group at the Masters, played poorly there. This one actually hurt. This one, he got his heart broken, and I actually think that'll make him better at the next time he's in that position.
And I would argue he got beat. Like we do this all the time. Like it's a silly sports radio thing where did he lose? Did he get beat? I would say he got beat. Like he played an unbelievable round of golf. And I'll go to immediately. Like I wanted to look this up before we got on the podcast, but strokes gained around the green for Victor, he was 10th in the field, gained more than three strokes on the field. Scrambling, he was 6th. That's 14 for 21. That's really good for a guy that I sat on this podcast last night and said, nope, not going to do it because I don't trust his short game.
I do think Oak Hill's thick, long rough kind of negated or
mitigated
or reduced, mitigated some of the clear weakness. If he was pitching off, that really tight, grainy Bermuda, it could have been a different story. But look, I think he's made tremendous strides in that area. It's not for a lack of effort, right? Like he's clearly putting in the work.
No,
it's rare to have a world-class player who has such a glaring deficiency. But I thought his performance here leads me to believe that a major championship is not too far away. How about the other big headliners, Rex, who still did crack the top 10? Scottie Scheffler, kind of doomed by that Saturday 73, as well as Rory McIlroy, who kind of did what he always does, teased us 3 consecutive rounds of 69 to close out the week, ended up finishing T7. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
Didn't have his best stuff. I think I'm talking with him Saturday night after that round. He was clear that he didn't feel like he was hitting the ball well enough. He actually talked about hitting the driver and knowing it was going to go in the rough and just kind of coming to grips with that. And that's got to be for a player of his caliber who has done things with the driver at major championships that really no one outside of probably Tiger Woods and maybe Jack Nicklaus have done. That's got to be hard for him to swallow. But reading the transcript tonight, I was more taken by the idea that he, again, let the mental game get the best of him. that teeing off and already being behind, like someone's already jumped out to a 4, 5, 6-stroke lead on Thursday, gets in his head and he starts pressing. That to me is amazing for a player, one, as accomplished as he is, and two, as talented as he is. It's fascinating to me that Rory is sometimes Rory's worst enemy.
I mean, it's a good way to put it. And I think it was striking that
thanks for the input.
it just there was a moment of reflection when Brooks was going down 16 and Rory was teeing off on 18. Doug Ferguson, I'm officially the last person to leave this media center here
Doug's
at Oak
gone.
Hill.
Bye, Doug.
Yeah.
Bye, Doug.
Doug's done.
Doug.
That Rory was coming down 18. Brooks was on an adjacent fairway going down 16. Could you have imagined the 2014 PGA when Rory McIlroy is 23, 24 years old, just won his 4th major championship? Brooks was actually a funny story. Brooks played a practice round with Jonas Blix that week, and Tom Watson, who was that year's Ryder Cup captain, wanders up to him on the first tee and asks him, "Have you guys seen Harris English?" And they're like looking around like, "No, I haven't seen Harris English." He goes, "Huh. All right, I'm looking for Harris. Do you mind if I play with you guys while I go out in the golf course and see if I can find him there?" Yeah, sure, whatever. Brooks launches one over the tree.
Tom had no
fairway.
idea.
A month later, he goes on to finish T4 at the U.S. Open. And Tom Watson, as they're walking down the first fairway, goes to Brooks and said, "Hey, which club do you play out of?" He thought Brooks Koepka was a club pro. He thought Brooks Koepka was a club pro. That year's Ryder Cup captain, I think that obviously portended poorly for what would go down.
Probably would have told us what was going to happen in Scotland. And actually, of all the columns I've gotten my hand slapped on, and I got my hand slapped really, really hard on this one, it was the column coming out of that Ryder Cup and saying that Tom Watson was not the captain for that time. And nothing against Tom. Like, look, man, you can't take anything against his legacy, but that's a perfect example.
Captain, I'm not sure he was the captain for any time.
But that's well, no, I mean, he's the last captain to win on over in Europe. So I would say there was a time when he was a very, very good captain.
Not with the mentality that he had for that
and that anecdote is a perfect example of why. And it has nothing to do with his ability to be a captain. It's nothing to do with his ability to play golf. He's just completely unconnected. Like at that point in time, if you didn't know who Brooks Koepka was on some level, to the point that you confused him with a club pro, is just baffling.
I forgot what the point of the story was. Oh, that was the week. Oh, that was the week that Rory won his 4th major championship. Like you could not have envisioned 9 years ago that Rory would not win another one, and that Brooks Koepka, the quote unquote club pro, would now have 5. I mean, he has established himself as the preeminent player of the post-Tiger era. He has more than Rory. He has more than JT. He has more than Spieth. He has more than all of these players for which we tend to crown with 1 or 2 achievements. He's the best of them. He is the best of them. That is indisputable. I see you, sausage finger.
Thanks. Didn't think you saw it. I would want to turn this on you. You're right. That is the dichotomy of that is interesting. But I would want to turn this on you because I wrote it last night, and watching today and listening to the interview, I wrote that he has become humanized, and the Netflix special had a lot to do with that. I think we got an insight into him that I don't think he had ever allowed. I think, again, talking with Claude, certainly the last week, but even before that, there is an exterior that I think he's let down a little bit. Would you agree with that?
No. Nope. Nope. At tournaments, no. I think there's a depth to his story that didn't necessarily exist before. But when you get him inside the ropes, he's still Terminator. When you get him behind a microphone, he's still the alpha. I wouldn't say he's robotic at all. I think he is playing a character at golf tournaments. I think Tiger Woods in his heyday played a character at golf tournaments. Yes, it is absolutely performative. He wants to show no weakness. He doesn't want to give his peers any sense of hope, any glimmer of opportunity. I think it's completely performative. I mean, I've heard countless times today that the Brooks Koepka you see at golf tournaments is not the same person who you see at home, right? Like you've heard that as well. I don't need to see Brooks being this this vulnerable character at golf tournaments. It would feel like disingenuous to what he is. I mean, he's established himself
If he was warm and fuzzy, if suddenly he became Rory, you'd be like, who is he? Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Like, no, he's not this thoughtful, introspective guy at golf tournaments. He's there to bash your brains in, and he has the record that like proves that he can do it. It's like, so we always talk about Rory, right? Like how young and free and confident that he used to be, and now you wonder, can he tap back into that sort of mentality now that he's evolved and he's become more well-read and he's more well-rounded and he's a father and he's a husband. Like, can he tap back into that ruthless aggression that he's always had? Brooks is the same person. Brooks is exactly the same as when he came out in 2017. Is there a depth to his story now? Do we know more about the struggles to getting back?
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that makes him more interesting. Is he a different person? Has he been humbled on this stage? No.
Oh yeah.
I don't
I feel like he has. I feel like injury, and again, this goes back to last year, and I'm sure that you had this conversation with Claude, but it was about this time last year when he started wrestling with the idea, do I need to go to LIV? And we know now that decision was based entirely on the idea that at 30-something years old, he thought he was washed, which, again, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around considering his record, but his body hurt so much. And he had gone through so much, and he didn't feel like he was at a point where he can continue to be Brooks Koepka on the PGA Tour. So, okay, I'm going to take the bag. Money to Claude Harmon on that one. That to me shows me that at some point, and again, maybe you're right. Maybe he hasn't been humanized, because reading the comments of our podcast last night, it doesn't sound to me like the public has any more affinity for him now than they did before. However, I think just in our eyes, or at least in my eyes, I would say that, yeah, I at least try to see another side of Brooks. Whereas before,
I like this side. I like his story.
I like the Stone Cold Killer too. I have nothing against him. I mean, look, Kobe was a god in LA. I mean, because of the Kobe mentality. That was the whole idea, Mamba mentality. However, in this particular case, I have, at least in my own mind, humanized him to the point that, okay, I can empathize with what he's gone through. I can understand that, man, like the injuries were really, really bad. And he was wrestling with a lot of stuff that, as good as I was, I may never get back to there. That to me makes it a compelling story.
He's great to write. Like, boy, you can count on one hand the number of players who you would want to write about more than Brooks Koepka. We talked about in this preview podcast earlier this week at the PGA Championship, like how difficult it is to write about Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler. Their career trajectory has basically gone in one direction. Their little their blips throughout their career is, I didn't play well for 2 or 3 months, or I had a bad major championship season. Like, those are those guys as setbacks. We're talking about some real, let's use his words, effing poop over the past couple of years that Brooks Koepka has dealt with. That makes him more interesting. That makes him more compelling. We want depth of character. It makes them relatable. Sure. It makes them interesting. It just, to think that he is a different person inside the ropes. No,
I wasn't saying that.
No,
but I wasn't saying that.
Yeah,
I think what I was trying to say
to cover him, he is way more interesting now than when he was in his Shinnecock Bell Reef days.
Oh, absolutely. You're right, because there are the layers, and there is the idea that in a lot of this is Netflix, and I think that was 100% performative. Like, he was playing to the cameras, and there's no doubt about that. But you and I both have talked to enough people around him to understand that it was real. Like, he looked at his own career, professional mortality in the face, and decided, you know what, I'm going to try to do this.
He's incredibly honest. He's incredibly honest with his own expectations, with his own performances. Like, that's one of his better qualities, according to those who know him best. Right? Like, he can, like he said earlier this week on the Barstool podcast, like, I choked to the Masters. He is real. He doesn't want the fluff. He doesn't pretend. And I think that quality has actually served him quite well. throughout his career. What do you think's possible? He's 33 years old. What do you think's possible?
I mean, for his career, if he can stay healthy, I mean, suddenly we start talking about like Phil Mickelson range, right? That's the next step.
That's one more. It's only one more. He could do that. He could do that next month.
You're
US
right.
Open.
And like
There's
that was
no
going to be
one
my
better at the US
follow-up to
Open
you.
for 6 months.
I don't know that I would make him. I was about to ask you if he would be your favorite. I'm not quite sure he'd be my favorite at that particular golf course. You and I just got through slapping it around there. So I don't know if I would pick him to be the favorite there, but he would be among the favorites. I would say, I mean, the ceiling is very, very high if he can stay. I mean, that's the asterisk always, right? If he can stay healthy, then of course, I mean, we've seen what he can do. In less than 2 years, he won 4. So if he goes on another tear like that, suddenly we'll start talking about Tiger Woods territory, which seems outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, LACC is such a unique US Open venue. I mean, if it's soft, if they haven't had the rough grow in like they want to, like we played at 3 weeks ago or so, like you could have 15, 20 under par, win that golf tournament. That's not really Brooks Koepka's specialty.
What did you pick to win this week? 8? Did you go 8?
I picked 8.
I did
and
too.
It was 9.
Yeah, we were pretty close. I think I picked Scottie and you picked Rahm.
No, I picked Scottie. But I said Brooks Koepka would be the low live player.
I picked DJ.
So that was 1-2 on the leaderboard. Kudos to me. I wouldn't put him. I mean, boy, the way
tip your own hat at yourself.
The way he's performed in the major championships, I don't know how you would put him anything other than, well, boys. I mean, Scottie finished T2 here. John Rahm is a force every time he tees it up. I mean, he's at worst 3. I think if it was a better golf course fit, I think he'd be a no-brainer. Number 1, given his record in the U.S. Open, but 60-yard wide fairways, little rough. I do think scoring will be good. It's not necessarily going to be the best fit for him.
And I will say this, and this goes to the larger LIV picture, because I'm sure we had this conversation going into the Masters, because we just didn't know, like, how do the LIV players slot in? They're playing 54-hole events. We don't have shot length. We can't quantify if they're playing well or not. We don't have strokes gained, whatever, to decide are they playing well enough. I think the last 2 majors have completely dispelled that in my mind, and I don't know. Like, going forward, I'm a little lost, to be quite frank with you, because there are ways that you and I sit down when we're doing previews and we decide, okay, this guy's playing well, that guy's not. Look, you can go and say, oh, Dustin Johnson won last week on the LIV Tour, but you don't have the strokes gain. It's only 54 holes. And again, I'm not getting into that debate whether if it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's 54 holes and it's a very limited field. I just don't know how to handicap these guys, but apparently it doesn't matter.
I mean, I think at this point, good golf is good golf, right? I do think that we've seen a benefit from LIV's schedule that 3 to 4 months off was very well used for Brooks Koepka, rehabbing his body. It was very well used for Phil Mickelson, getting everything in order. Dustin hasn't played particularly well. Bryson DeChambeau, who has reasserted himself over the past 2 weeks, finishing T4. We never would have predicted that at the beginning of the week, but it was all because of the time he had off to work on his body to make sure that he was physically fit. Just to put a fine point on Brooks Koepka at the majors for the next 2 years, if you take out last year's tournament when he was obviously lost, we've documented that. The last 2 appearances in the Open Championship, T6 and T4. Yeah, he is going to be a factor once again in the next 2 majors. How would you wrap up this week, Rex, at the PGA Championship? Last time the PGA was here was a decade ago. Did you enjoy the week? Do you think the PGA should come back here? What are just kind of your final thoughts on the week?
Our friend Doug Ferguson, I saw tweeted this morning that the PGA should not leave Rochester without re-signing Oak Hill. What's the next available date? 2032,
2031.
maybe?
2031, according to the banners that I'm looking at.
Don't let one of those banners hit you on the head. I don't know that I particularly agree with this, and we've had fun with you this week, myself and Mark Slayball, the golf writer from ESPN, because you are a Rochester homer. It's your home game. You've leaned in. You've been just a raging pain in the butt about it, and the pooper about it. I will say, I will say this: the golf course itself, it was phenomenal. Was phenomenal. What they've done with the redesign is really, really cool. Like walking around the property, I don't remember anything from Jason Duffner winning, And I can probably walk you through all 18 holes right now because I was so fascinated by what they've done just with the layout and revitalizing the Donald Ross design and making it so much more textured and interesting. That being said, and look, you're a homer because it's your hometown event. Okay. So I'm just going to put, and I thought about this on the plane on the way home, on the very, very long way home tonight. I'm from a little tiny town in Florida called Titusville, Florida. And I loved growing up in Titusville, Florida. It was an awesome place. They should never play a major championship in Titusville, Florida. They probably shouldn't play a major championship in Rochester. If you really like Oak Hill, dig it up and take it to Long Island. That's my take.
Why not? What's wrong with wrong? What is wrong with Rochester?
It's a tiny little town.
Try and say that 3 times. What is wrong with Rochester?
Spit it out. Tiny little town, podunk little airport. The hotel I stayed in was bad. Traffic was bad. Like, I can keep going, man. It should not host a major championship. There's a reason why major cities host Super Bowls, and a major championship is our Super Bowl.
Rochester is a major city.
It is not a major city. It has no other major sports. No other major sports.
It does have 2. It has a minor league hockey team and a minor league baseball team.
Okay, it's in the name. You actually said it in the name. You said minor in both names. They don't have any other major sport. They don't have an NBA team. They don't have an MLB team. They don't have a major league sport there.
Buffalo Bills are an hour and a half away.
That's Buffalo.
Is an hour and a half
Buffalo.
away.
You're talking about an entirely different market. If you want to, all right, fine. Dig up Oak Hill and put it in Buffalo.
The Rochester metropolitan area is the 3rd largest regional economy in New York after only New York City and Buffalo.
Okay, that's fine.
Case in point. For your first point, first point, Oak Hill I thought was tremendous. I came here as a kid. I played 2 junior tournaments here. I remember hating it. I described it as like a long harbor town where you could be in the fairway and just get blocked out. It was super frustrating, super unmemorable.
How did you know? You never played Harbor Town at that point.
Now I can relate like that. The Sean McKeel PJ was obviously a disaster, super unmemorable. You think back to 2013, I covered that one. Wasn't great either. The golf course now is fantastic. The 6 holes a little bit ridiculous, quite possibly one of the hardest holes I think I've ever seen. But there's so many good holes now, and 12 through 15 on this golf course. So much can happen. So many swing potentials. I thought the golf course was fantastic. Andrew Green, the renovation he did back in 2019, like, wow, tip of the cap. I do look forward to this golf tournament coming back here. And yeah, maybe I'm biased. Maybe my perspective is shaded on things. It was absolutely fantastic to come back home for this major championship. Who knows, Rex? I mean, you might be dead in 8 years' time if this thing comes back in 2031. Wow. I'm not sure if I'm going to still be doing this. And so to be able to spend 4 or 5 really soggy hours with my dad slopping around Oak Hill, seeing some high school friends who I hadn't seen in forever was absolutely tremendous. Spending time with my family. It has been a really great week, seeing some folks in the crowd that I haven't seen in a very long time. Selfishly, even if I'm the only person outside of the Rochester area who wants to see this golf tournament come back, I do hope it comes back. I think the golf course is worthy of major championships, and I do believe the Rochester area, though they may be starved for big time events, I think anyone who participated in this PGA Championship this week knows that this was a hearty faithful. They were out in droves during the downpour on Saturday, and they were out in full throat on Sunday. What was a glorious day, even though you were stuck in the Delta terminal. All right.
I mean, outside of Oak Hill, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the second most important thing that Rochester is known for is something called the garbage plate. Am I wrong? Right?
That's just lazy reporting. No, they're known
again. Tell me I'm wrong.
They're known for the
2 minor league teams.
They're known for the Finger Lakes area where I actually did grow up. People say that I'm from Rochester. I'm not. People from the Finger Lakes in Canada
now you're distancing yourself.
Do not associate with Rochester. No, I would never drive for 35 minutes to go up here. Canandaigua, New York had everything that I need. I will be there the next 2 days. I'll send you plenty of snappy chats and keep you informed.
The 6th hole is the hardest hole on the PGA Tour this year by 0.1 stroke, which is dramatic. That's by by a long shot.
Oh yeah.
Just I wanted to look.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I didn't mind it at all. I love the idea that those guys had to work hard for a par.
A little bit silly, but sometimes that's okay. Par is just a construct. Doesn't matter if it's par 70, it's a par 71. You're all playing the same golf course. All right. Enjoy the graduation on Monday. It's in about 9 hours. Make sure you get some rest. Enjoy the party. I'm going to enjoy Canandaigua, New York. We will reconvene next week to recap Colonial, talk about the NCAA championships, where I'm going to be next week in Arizona, as well as preview the Memorial, the next designated event on the PGA Tour schedule. Enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for listening to all of our Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav throughout Major Week. It was once again a success. We appreciate all the views on YouTube. We appreciate all the listens and downloads on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for another great week. Look forward to doing it once again at the U.S. Open in LA. Those are going to be tough with the time. Those will be tough with the time difference, Rex. But we will strive to do so and bring them to you in a timely fashion. All right, that's going to do it. We'll talk to you next week.